So welcome to the week 3 classes, and this week we are looking into a particular grammatical component called shell nouns, and it's a useful tool for summarizing and organizing ideas in writing. They may look very simple, okay, and you may have read many of them in other readings or in other articles, but they are very, very useful that you can use in your own writing. Since we have started talking about summary writing, I'm sure you have rough ideas what it means by writing concisely. Okay, last week we talked about how you are going to delete, remove details like examples of particular people, incidents, and whatnot. Okay, so by conciseness, we simply mean how you're going to condense similar ideas in a term or two, so that you can use fewer words to say the same thing. Okay, and one of the ways to talk about ideas or topic matters in more concise terms would be the way that you can master umbrella terms. By umbrella terms, we do have other more technical terms for this, but generally speaking, it means the word that covers some other words with similar meaning or more specific meaning. For example, when we have buses, taxis, private cars, and so on, and you can summarize these cars into a word, of course, car, or vehicle, V-E-H-I-C-L-E-S. Okay, vehicle. And then another concept about nouns would be using shell nouns. Okay, how you are introducing general ideas using shell nouns. And you may also see that shell nouns would be very useful for organizing your text, which is something that I will go over in this lesson. And alongside the concept of shell nouns, in week 4 we'll talk about nominalization, but let's focus on the first part first. Okay, in week 2, I talked about the key to advanced writing would be your ability to form complex noun groups, and one of the components is shell nouns. And here I've already got some examples for you, so you can use perspective, point, argument, view to talk about your views in general. So here we've got a technical definition of shell noun. So according to Kohaka and Hurst, 2014, shell nouns are abstract nouns such as fact, issue, idea, and problem, which facilitate efficiency by avoiding repetition of long stretches of text. And they are unspecific and can only be interpreted together with their shell content. Okay, so for nouns, you may know that you use nouns to name tangible things, like physical things, like your laptop, your mouse, your bench, your table, your bedroom. But we've also got abstract nouns, to name something that we can't see. So for example, facts, problems, those are the things that you can't see, but straightly speaking, you can see on a piece of paper if you write them down. But in general, when you talk about problems, they're usually not physical. Okay, and you can see the definition saying that you use shell nouns to avoid repetition so that you don't have to repeat a long chunk of text as you are writing a new sentence after the first one. So this is the idea. But of course, to make life easier for you, I've got an easier definition for you. So, of course, shell nouns can be used for many aspects, as you will see in the next slide. But an easy definition would be nouns for referencing a text. For example, you may use article, paper, essay, or parts of a text itself. So you will use a lot of these nouns in your writing in order to clearly point out what you're talking about. Okay, so maybe you are talking about explaining something, you may say the explanation, okay, or the reasons, or the factors. Okay, so that's what we mean by shell nouns in a simpler sense. So here it is. You've got at least 6 types of shell nouns. So as I read some research articles, I was told that shell nouns is actually one concept very hard to define. And I don't intend to define what it means by shell nouns. I only group some of the useful nouns that you might use in your academic writing or essay writing. It's not just for this subject. Maybe they will be useful, very useful for other subjects that you are attending as well. Okay, so the first type will be analytical. You may use nouns such as analysis, approach, measure, method, procedure, process, and technique, and more. Okay, aside from talking about your analysis, you can also comment on some of the points. For example, you may say the advantage of something, or the challenge of this research, or the controversy of the issue or the topic. Or the other way around, you may, aside from saying advantage, you also say disadvantage, drawback. Or if you have something to say about the importance of your research findings, you may say insights. Okay, so a slight problem would be issue. Okay, so in the sense that it is less negative. And then we have factual shell nouns. So when you talk about aims, case, characteristic, fact, framework, function of something, goal of your study, or properties of a thing, a physical object, or a plan, or a campaign, and so on. And the linguistic shell nouns will be very useful for your writing as well when you talk about arguments, when you are very sure about something and say assertion, when you talk about other people's claims, comments, or the debate on the topic, discussion on the topic, explanation, or reflection, etc. And logical shell nouns has to do with the logical relations about things, no matter they are in your essay or in the real world. So you can say causes, reasons, consequence, effect, factor, impact, justification means you explain something with reasons, outcomes, result. Okay, and textual would be like references, reference words pointing at your text itself. Okay, it's just like calling, addressing yourself when you are talking. Let's say instead of saying I, you would say Erik is giving you a lecture now. Okay, for textual shell nouns, you can use article, essay, paper, report, review, study, thesis, depending on what type of text you are writing. So basically, for this subject, you will use essay, paper, article. That will just do. So now, take out the article written by Sarah Hagi again and have a look at the examples from her article, as well as the summaries that I have prepared for you. And there are quite a few of shell nouns used to talk about cancel culture. Okay, so cancel culture is mentioned in some other ways using shell nouns. For example, Sarah Hagi used the idea, the term, this perspective, this movement, or a catch-all. A catch-all is a catch-all phrase or catch-all term, an umbrella term, just like shell nouns, right? And the text itself and its content are referred to in general terms, such as in my summary text. So I point at Sarah Hagi's article by saying her article, and then her arguments, her view, her point, etc. Okay? So these are the shell nouns that you can use. Well, this slide aims to confuse you with another concept which is similar to shell nouns, which is called superordinate nouns. While shell nouns are those that you use for introducing some general ideas, you need to specify the content following the shell nouns. For example, when you use the word argument, you do have to provide the arguments as you have promised. Okay, but in this case, when you talk about superordinate nouns, you are using nouns that cover meanings of other nouns that are used to mention a type of things. For example, in Sarah Hagi's article, comedian is used to refer generally to those famous ones mentioned in the text. For example, you have Shane Gillis or Bill Burr. So these two people can be summarized in just one word. They are comedians. Okay? And public figure, the words or the phrase public figure would cover the term comedian and other kinds of celebrities. So for example, the word public figure would cover comedian and singer and director or KOL, as you may know who they are, right? So this is what we mean by umbrella terms. When you look at the diagram, the tree diagram on this slide, you will find that it actually looks quite like an umbrella. And the word public figure, the term public figure, actually umbrellas or covers all the terms under comedian, singer, Shane Gillis, Bill Burr, Taylor Swift, and many more. So the word or the term public figure has the meaning, okay, as much as the more specific nouns like comedian and singer. So after briefly talking about shell nouns, you may want to go over activity part 1, finding shell nouns. Okay, you may first want to read Hagi's article again, but focus just on page 1, and highlight as many shell nouns you find as possible. Okay, second, among these shell nouns, which ones function as pointers referring back to the idea of cancel culture, which means other ways to say cancel culture. 3. The word people is a shell noun and considered a vague word if you use it alone. So how can you make people, the word people, more specific? So you may find one example from page 1. Similarly, number 4, as you will write about people, I'm sure, you will write about people in your essay writing. But it's not enough just to say some people, people, and so on. So you may want to look at 1.3, the example from the previous question, And you may also check the corpus that I introduced to you and what you can add before or after people to make it less vague. So I have provided the link in the pink box, so you would click the link to have a search based on the tutorial that I have given you earlier on. And as a responsible teacher, of course, I will show you some corpus data having to do with people collocating with other grammatical components. So maybe you can read from the left to the right. So each line represents a part of a sentence. But we don't have to look at the whole sentence. We just have to look at certain parts to look at what kind of grammatical items will follow the keyword people or before the keyword people. So first one, we have a people in the social network. And two, we have American people. A few lines down, we have a people who depend primarily on something, or people who were involved in something, or people with dementia, people with significant cognitive impairment. So maybe you don't have to understand what those sicknesses are about. Alzheimer disease or dementia. I'm sure during the course of your study you will come across these terms very soon. But focus on the grammar. What grammatical items are following or preceding the keyword people? Have a look and go back to the question and answer them accordingly. And the next question will require you to read a sample paragraph. Actually, it was from the students that I used last week, but I found that it was a little bit clumsy, so I rephrased it a little bit. So let's read it together. The impact of cancel culture on public figures is apparently trivial. Although some celebrities have been toppled from their seats of power, they are hardly affected or cancelled at all. This argument suggests that cancel culture has little power over these influential people in society. Despite all the criticisms, they continued to be defended by their loyal fan base and supporters, disregarding the accusations made. So now here's the question. If you read in the middle of the paragraph, we have the phrase, this argument. We have the shall now argument here. So what is the function of this argument in the paragraph? Okay, so think about it. One hint for you would be you look at the relationship between the noun phrase, this argument, with the previous sentences in this paragraph. So try to link them together. Okay, so let's move on. Right, let's continue. So here we have the bonus question. Okay, so we talk quite a lot about cohesion and coherence. In the previous slide, we talked about the function of shall nouns. One of its functions would be to maintain the coherence or cohesion within the paragraph, so that shall noun is a summary of all the previous sentences before the shall noun. Okay, so it establishes the link between the previous ideas, the previous content, and the content coming up after this argument. Okay, so aside from that, can you tell me a couple of features that are key to the cohesion or cohesiveness or consistency of the content in the paragraph? So you may want to look at the content, this paragraph again, and I have highlighted some keywords, and look for the similarities of these keywords and tell me about the characteristics of consistency in the paragraph. So for example, for the words in violet color, you have public figures, celebrities, influential people, and they. So in what terms are they similar? And then you have the words in pink, cancel culture, toppled, cancel culture, criticism, accusations. So how are they similar? And you have, is it Tiffany blue or azure color? You have trivial, hardly affected, little power. So how are they similar? Okay, so try name two features that are key to the consistency of the content in the paragraph. Here we are. After the class 1 activities, we have an activity of a larger scale. We only have one activity, which is you're going to write a summary text based on an article I have chosen from a journal. Okay, so it's by Veil and Waymar. It's very recent, on a crisis situation in the University of Kentucky. Okay, about some controversial issues. Okay, so you may want to read the excerpt closely, and then you will want to do some reading and note-taking by highlighting the main points for summarizing in your text. And you may want to go back to the previous slides talking about shell nouns, and also in the activity sheet you have a list of shell nouns on page 2. So you may want to choose them, some of them that are useful for summarizing the ideas. And if you're unsure how to use them, you can check the usage of those nouns by consulting the corpus. So I think while we are doing the activity together in the class, I will also show you how you can use the corpus to look for the information that you want for writing your text with the shell nouns. Okay, and at the end of the activity sheet, you have some guiding questions. So you may want to read them carefully so that you know how many paragraphs you can write and how you may choose to paraphrase the key points. So very soon we are going to talk about some key techniques for paraphrasing. Okay, but first of all, you may want to learn how to summarize ideas with superordinate nouns and shell nouns. So let me recap the key points for the reading tips that I have given you in the activity sheet. First of all, do not go for the word-for-word approach. I'm sure there are many technical terms or difficult words or phrases in the article. For example, you have a term called vigilant anticipation. Okay, well, I would say I had the urge to look for its meaning as I read the text, but I found that some hints, some explanations are already in the next sentence. Okay, so don't waste your time trying to look up all the words from the text. Otherwise, you will spend most of the time reading and you don't have time for writing. Okay, and the next tip would be finding the text signals that help you understand meanings of difficult words or technical terms. So maybe one trick or one tip that I can give you would be for those words that you don't understand, you try ignore them and see if you can still understand roughly the idea of the sentence or the paragraph itself. If you can, this means those words may not be that important, especially with some adjectives that are quite advanced. You may want to look at other adjectives in the text that may give you a brief idea about perhaps the writer's attitude towards the topic, or the writer's or the author's description about the matter. Also, as with the examples that I've just given you, the term vigilant anticipation, you can actually find the definition or a rough explanation of a term in the next clause with the signal words which means. So when you find those words such as this means, meaning that, or for example, or in other words, or that is to say, these phrases, okay, would be very useful for you to identify meanings or definitions of some key terms. And remember, always read smartly. Okay, you will of course go from the top to the bottom of the text, but skimming or speed reading sometimes don't help that much if you are working on a task. It's not like reading novels, it's not reading non-fiction that you can skim 10 lines in 10 seconds, for example. But you are going to look for a particular place in the text for the information you want. As I told you last week, it may be the topic sentences, it may be the concluding sentences, and you may find the same when you read this article. Okay, so read smartly, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, in the guiding questions, you may want to write the summary in 2 paragraphs. Because it's a problem solution article, so very naturally you will want to spend 1 paragraph talking about problems, or the problem described in the article. So what you may start discussing in your summary text or describing in your summary text would be, what is the problem reported in the article? So for varieties, if you are looking for varieties, okay, what is the alternative word, or what are the alternative words for problem in this article? So you may start the sentence with something like, Veil and Waymar's article reported the problem, the crisis, the controversy, the debate, or and so on. Okay, it's up to you. And try, okay, for conciseness, okay. Sometimes we call conciseness concision. I myself prefer conciseness. Yeah, try writing the problem in just 1 sentence. Okay, the hint would be building the noun group based on the shell nouns you have chosen, with the examples below. For example, you can say the problem of, and then you've continued writing using a noun phrase. So remember, after the preposition of, you must use a noun phrase, packing up the issue. Okay. Alternatively, you may want to use the problem that, and in this case, you can use a full clause, meaning a full sentence, describing the issue, okay, in a complete sentence. Again, if you are working on the summary text at home right now, you may want to check the usage of these nouns by consulting the corpus again with the link I have provided in this slide. Or if you are working on the summary in the class, I will also demonstrate briefly how you may find the usage of problems in expert text so that you have some ideas how you can use it yourself. Okay, so you may want to separate the problem paragraph from the solution paragraph. So you have 2 paragraphs, maybe. It's up to you. It's a way, paragraphing is a way to separate different points. So remember, you are going to write 1 point for 1 paragraph. Okay, one paragraph for 1 point, sorry. So in this paragraph, you may want to talk about what solutions did the authors suggest. And at the same time, think about alternatives to say suggest. Okay, what are the other ways to say suggest? For example, what is the noun form for suggest? So by mastering different forms of one word, you would know how to paraphrase very well. Okay, remember, knowing a lot of vocabulary is not enough. You need to know how to use them. All right, and the second question goes, what parts of the text do you read when you look for the solutions suggested in the article? Again, so this has to do with the reading tips that I've just given you. Read smartly. Okay, expert articles, journal articles, are the ones that are written very strategically, that they would write to the point, very quickly, very punchy, that it arrives at a particular argument in a way that you see it very explicitly, and you can find very explicitly in a particular position of a text. So if you were in my class last week, you would know how to find the key information without the specific details or specific examples in the paragraph. Okay, so go back to the previous slides or the previous week to look for the information if you need to. And then after finding out the key points, you have to paraphrase them. Remember, you can't just simply copy and paste the author's main ideas into your summary text. You have to change the words so that it becomes your own words. Okay? So what strategies would you choose? I have given you 3 main strategies. And the first one, changing the sentence structure. For example, university must do A, B, C, or D, and you change it into it is a must. And in this case, the modal verb must, is converted into a noun, and the whole sentence has changed. So we had universities as the subject, and now we have it as the subject with the linking verb is as the main verb. Okay, so this is one consideration. And the second strategy is actually the same as the first one, because when you change the part of speech of a word, the whole sentence has to change. Other parts has to change. So we have another example here. We offer 4 recommendations. Okay, can be paraphrased into something like the authors recommended that. So it's pretty much like rephrasing the sentence in reported speech. Of course, you are not using we when you paraphrase. You have to use the authors. And then the main change here would be the word recommendation, which is originally a noun. And you have to convert it into, for example, a verb in this case. So it doesn't work when you change recommendation into suggestion. We offer 4 suggestions. It is not paraphrasing. It is pretty much like copying. I won't say it's plagiarizing at this stage, but if you are not careful, if you are directly copying the sentence structure to your own summary text and changing just a few words by looking for the synonyms or the similar words, it's not okay. The third strategy would be changing voice from passive voice to active voice all the way around. In this case, we have diversity committees cannot continue to be staffed only with black and brown people. So you may want to paraphrase it into something like universities cannot continue to staff diversity committees with people who are black or brown. So these 3 strategies have one same purpose, which is to change the sentence structure as you paraphrase. Okay, so learn these strategies and it will take you miles. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. The focus of this week will be on nouns, in particular shell nouns and superordinate nouns. You may find that actually they are trivial, maybe, and you may wonder why we aren't talking about paragraph writing skills or how you're going to write an introduction and so on and so forth. I hope that through this small grammatical item, you will know that how you can summarize ideas first. Okay, and of course, along the way, I have already told you about how you are going to organize ideas, like separating points in paragraphs. And exactly, the shell nouns would be very useful for connecting ideas in the paragraph. Okay, as we have had the sample paragraph by a student with the term this argument. So that is the way to avoid repetition as well as making your text more concise, less clumsy, and it's a way to introduce general ideas that are going to be elaborated in the text. So it's some kind of a promise that you are making at the beginning of a text. For example, when you are introducing ideas in the introduction, you will have to fulfill the purposes by giving that number of arguments in the body paragraphs. So shell nouns are very useful grammatical components for you to generalize or summarize ideas in fewer words. Okay, the same goes for superordinate nouns, so that you can summarize a few similar ideas or cases in a word or a phrase. So perhaps when we talk about building vocabulary, those superordinate nouns would be the ones that you have to master from time to time. Okay, so here it is. That's all for this slide for now. And I will give you a preview of week 4 in the last slide of this presentation. And coming up in week 4, we move forward to another kind of nouns that we should focus on as we write, as we paraphrase, as we summarize ideas. Okay, so the idea is nominalization. And as I told you in the class just then, nominalization is more than just changing words into nouns, and it involves a more complex process of changing, some verbs into nouns or some adjective into nouns, but the surrounding words or surrounding grammatical components would also have to change in order to pack a sentence into a noun phrase, a complex noun group. For example, in the slide here, you have a sentence, fans withdraw the support for the celebrities. And after nominalization, the effect would be the withdrawal of support for the celebrities, or the withdrawal of support from the fans for the celebrities. Okay? As I told you, forming nouns would be key to conciseness in academic writing for the technicality, on how to be technical as you write your term papers. How you are writing more meaning, packing more meaning, not just in fewer words, but in a nutshell, fewer sentences. Okay, so I hope that after this week and after week 4, you have some basic ideas about how you are writing more concisely. So that's all for now. I hope you enjoy watching the lessons now, and I hope that we can use our precious time in the class time for writing and reading activities. Okay, so I look forward to seeing you again in the class. But above all, enjoy your weekend and take care. Goodbye.